Welcome to episode 70 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's January 9, and today the third round of the FA Cup kicks off. It's the beginning of that annual weekend when the cup becomes the cup again, the round where the big names enter. And there's an anniversary detail that makes today even better. This season marks 100 years since the modern third round entry principle was introduced, the structural rule that effectively kept the top two tiers out until the third round, shaping the FA Cup's rhythm into the version most of us grew up with. We've covered the Cup's birth on this pod, 1871, the oldest knockout competition in football, back in episode 11. I very much recommend listening to that episode if you haven't already, or go back and re-listen. It's worth it. But today's OTD is about the Cup's return, because the third round of 1945-46, the first FA Cup after World War II, wasn't just a football round. It was a national restart button. So today we'll do three things. We'll link this third round moment back to the Cup's long architecture. We'll explain why 1945-46 is a one-off Cup season, post-war football running on improvisation, economics and sheer will. And then we'll drop back 80 years, to January 9, 1946, and 19 second-leg third-round ties, and several of them refusing to end when the rules say they should. The third round is where the FA Cup becomes a national ritualistic event in the modern sense. The big names enter, the lower league grounds fill up, the draws suddenly look like stories rather than fixtures. And a century ago, 1925, the Cup formalizes something we now treat as natural. The top two tiers exempted until this stage. The third round in early January becomes the gateway. That's why this date lands so well for OTD. If you want to understand what the third round means, then don't just look at the glamour ties. You look at what the tournament demands from clubs, in travel, in time, in bodies, in light. We're in the first season after World War II has ended, but English football is not back yet. The Football League won't return for a full normal program until the following season. The Cup instead becomes a kind of national restart button, and it does it with a format designed to generate football and revenue. Ties played over 2 legs, giving clubs 2 match days instead of 1. It's not romance, it's economics. Gates open, receipts split, and crowds relearn the habit of going. But the infrastructure is still wartime scarred. There are no substitutions, there are no floodlights at most grounds. Travel and work patterns are still distorted. And in January, you're always negotiating with weather and daylight. Which brings us to January 9, 1946. It's a Wednesday. Third round with 19 ties out of the round's 32. All are return legs, the 2 p.m. kickoffs across the country. And the unifying theme isn't a great goal. It's the question, how does football end a match when it refuses to end and the sun is dropping? So let's begin at Goodison Park. It's Everton versus Preston North End. Preston had won 2-1 in the first leg at Deepdale just the Saturday prior. At Goodison, Everton do what they have to do. They win 1-0 in normal time, so aggregate 2-2. No away goals rule, no penalty shootout, so you go into extra time. And on this day in 1946, that meant 2 periods of 10 minutes. And even that doesn't settle it. During extra time, each side scores. Now the match on that day is 2-1, and the aggregate is 3-3, so still level. At this point, you're in a world of cup rules that sound almost mythical now. The teams play on until a goal is scored, and then a decisive moment around 8 minutes into that additional extra time. A penalty for Preston, converted by Bill Shankly. Yes, that Bill Shankly. In modern language, it reads like a golden goal in spirit. Keep playing, 1 goal instead. But in 1946, it isn't a designed innovation. It's simply how the competition is trying to force a result without inventing new machinery. The reporting varies on the exact minute. And the detail that matters is not the minute stamp, it's the reality. This was a cup tie that outlived its own timetable. It was only settled because one side finally broke through from the spot. And as a historical image, how about this? At the same time as Bill Shankly knocks Everton out of the cup, Bob Paisley is playing for Liverpool at Anfield. What delightful coincidence. 2 future architects of Liverpool's boot room and the club's greatest era on the same day, on the same side of the city, just separated by Stanley Park. That's the third round in 1946, the future hiding in plain sight. Now go to Selhurst Park. It's Crystal Palace versus Queen's Park Rangers. First leg, goalless after 90 minutes. Second leg, also goalless after 90 minutes. Then 2 times 10 minutes of extra time. Still goalless. That's 200 minutes now. And then they keep playing because, again, the competition logic is play to a finish. But just 7 minutes later, it's getting so dark that the referee abandons the match. 207 minutes without a goal across the two legs. Selhurst Park is described as mud. The football is described in the language of trench conditions. The tie doesn't resolve into a goal. It resolves into what really? This is important, because the rulers of the time aren't built with a clean solution for, quote, match abandoned due to darkness, unquote. Clubs have to consult the Football Association, and the competition scrambles to create order after the event. Eventually, the FA orders a replay, a week later at Craven Cottage, and QPR eventually win it. But on this day, January 9 itself, the Cup produces one of its great post-war images, a competition trying to compel an outcome in a world where the basic infrastructure, light, simply isn't available. Now go just north of London, and then back into the rain. We are at Vicarage Road in Watford. Nottingham Forest is visiting. First leg ended 1-1. So does the return leg. Go into extra time, and they keep going. A further 23 minutes beyond the standard extra time until the referee, F.W. Chadwick, blows his whistle and abandons the match after 133 minutes played. The conditions are described as atrocious: a treacherous pitch, a gale, torrential rain, and a match played deep into the half-light. Then you get one of those quintessential pre-substitution stories. Forest Ted Black breaks his nose early in the match. No substitutions, no protocol. He plays on. The newspapers call him the hero of the 133 minutes, not for a goal, but for staying upright in a match that becomes an endurance test. And because the club still needs a decision, the replay is ordered a week later on neutral ground at White Hart Lane. And now get ready for this. After full time, it's goalless. Of course it is. So into extra time it goes again. And in the 106th minute, our hero from the second leg, Ted Black with his broken nose, scores an own goal, which settles the tie to Watford's advantage. But if you want one single snapshot of post-war football's overlap with post-war life, you go to Gateshead. It's Gateshead versus Rotherham. It ends with a 2-0 win to Rotherham, who go through 4-2 in aggregate. But that's not why we remember this tie. No, it's for the equipment that doesn't belong on a football pitch. The Saturday prior, in the first leg, Rotherham's centre forward, Wally Ardron, had sustained head injuries, so he really shouldn't have featured in the second leg. But this was the reality of 1946 football. If you were selected, you played through knocks. If you couldn't, you lost appearance and bonus money. So against his doctor's recommendation, Ardron lined up, wearing a crash helmet, and still scored. Let me say that again. Ardron played in a crash helmet and still scored a goal. If you've ever seen the picture of that era, you can't help asking the question, is this an ARP helmet? ARP meaning Air Raid Precautionary? Something repurposed from civil defense? The reporting calls it a crash helmet, and either way it tells you exactly what kind of transition year this is. The war's objects are still in the room. And the match isn't gentle. Rotherham's goalkeeper Warnes is injured during the game and ends up in Newcastle Infirmary. And who do we see on the pitch for Rotherham? Mark Cooper, the ever-present winger for Sheffield Wednesday in the late 1920s and the first half of the 1930s, winning back-to-back championships and, would you have guessed it, the FA Cup in 1935. So on the same afternoon, in one tie, you have a striker in a crash helmet, a 44-year-old former FA Cup winner, and with 500 league appearances before World War II, a goalkeeper hospitalized, and the cup continuing as if the country is expected to absorb violence and carry on. That's 1946 football for you. Not sentimental, just real. And while the day has darkness and endurance, it also has outright chaos on the scoreboard. Middlesbrough and Leeds produce the kind of match that makes you check the paper twice. The first leg, at Ellen Road, had ended 4-4, in and of itself a wild scoreline. In the second leg, at Ayresome Park on this day, Leeds score first, 7 minutes in. And then Middlesbrough respond with a blitz that doesn't feel like a comeback. It feels like a system failure. Within a minute, Borough equalized. Then they add a penalty. And then the flood. By halftime, Middlesbrough has scored 7 goals. 7 goals in the first half of a cup tie, including a hat-trick by Mickey Fenton. Second half, only Leeds scores. So the final score is Middlesbrough 7, Leeds United 2. Crazy. Now add Wolverhampton, because the big clubs are in. The third round is doing what it still does, reasserting hierarchy. Wolves put 8 past Lowell's Athletic. And what stands out isn't the mismatch, it's the names. The left side of Wolves include Billy Wright and Jimmy Mullen, players who will define the club's post-war identity, and in Wright's case, becoming one of the emblematic England captains of the era. This is the third round in its other mode, the bigger machine arriving and reminding the competition that romance has its limits. But January 9, 1946 has one last twist, a reminder that the cup hasn't merely paused during the war years, it has been held in suspension. Portsmouth go out. This isn't last year's holders. Portsmouth are the holders because they won the cup in 1939, the last final before the war stopped everything, and they have, literally, held the trophy through the entire conflict. They lose the first leg 1-0, and they draw the second 0-0, and that's it. Nearly 7 years of being cup holders ends not with a defence at Wembley, but with elimination at Fratton Park, in a match described as hard and organised and missing the finishing touch. The cup is back, and the war pause is finally paid down. And scattered through the rest of the day are results that feel like the cup doing cup things. Barnsley overturned Newcastle, winning 3-0 on the day to flip a deficit from the first leg. Arsenal win 1-0 against West Ham, but after a 6-0 first leg loss, it's only a consolation. Liverpool do what Liverpool have to do, manage the second leg, protect the aggregate, and move on, with that future history sitting quietly on the team sheet. Well, one last human detail that belongs to this day's texture. Billy Little, Liverpool's great post-war winger, a club-defining figure, cannot get midweek leave from the RAF to play the second leg. So that's what football restarting actually looked like. So what should we take away from January 9, 1946? Well, you know it, 3 points. First, the third round isn't just a football round, it's a social round. It's when the national game becomes national, because everyone is involved and the calendar becomes shared culture. Second, post-war football was not a clean restart. It was improvisation under constraint. 2 leg ties for revenue, no subs, limited infrastructure, and rules that try to force an ending in a world where endings are not always available. And third, the cup has always been a competition where the conditions matter as much as the tactics. On this day, the conditions were the story, mud, injury, exhaustion, and the simple fact that at a little after 4 p.m. in January, England starts to go dark. On this day in 1946, the FA Cup did just return. It endured. That's all for episode 70 of OTD, The Cup in the Half-Light, January 9, 1946. If you have family stories of that first post-war cup, or memories passed down, or if you ever heard more about that crash helmet, what it really was and where it came from, email me at otd@17lawsky.com. Tips and corrections are always welcome. And please rate us 5 stars, subscribe, and tell a friend. Daily podcasts don't trigger the algorithm on their own. Tomorrow in episode 71, we go to January 10, 1981, the Mundialito final, Uruguay versus Brazil, and a small tournament that briefly carried the weight of a World Cup. See you then.